So when I saw those patch notes, it was just like, nope, log into the game right now, download the update, try this. And yeah, it handled exactly the way I expected it to. That was one of the things that going into 3.6, I just kind of, when I started flying the Cutlass, and obviously there's a few people out there who've been having this issue as well. I had that video where I crashed taking off in a Vanguard only to look up and see a Cutlass smash into one of the control towers at Lorville. And I think there's a lot of people out there, obviously, who've been having issues with the Cutlass. And I guess this and whatever improvements they've made to hover mode in between have kind of fixed this issue. Now, of course, I need to get out there and I need to test multiple other ships to see how they're handling. But taking the Cutlass in and landing it was a lot closer to what it used to be. A lot closer to what I was used to. I mean, a lot of the newer functions that we have gotten in between are still there, but the Cutlass just handled more like I expected it to. And, this once again kind of comes back to the thing of, is it a bug or is it intended, right? Because you never really know when you're dealing with early access gaming. But it led me down a strange train of thought. If the articulated engines were causing so many issues, and it seemed like they were, if they were indeed causing this many issues with the Cutlass, do we really even need the articulated engines anymore? I mean, do we really need the engines to articulate? Because, strangely enough, going all the way back to the OG Cutlass, the main reason why we lost the articulated thrusters in the first place, and I mean, you can see the back thrusters there and the two side thrusters, was because as the ship was flying around, they were, flopping this way and that, and visually it looked kind of odd. And I think it was even Chris Roberts who came right out and said they look too floppy the way that they're kind of flipping around, but they were working correctly, mechanically speaking. And I think that the original idea behind those thrusters was the idea that, when the Cutlass was still supposed to be the highly maneuverable pirate fighter, the role that would later be taken over by the Buccaneer. So I kind of have been coming back to this thing, like, do we really even need articulated engines on the Cutlass? Do they even really serve a functional purpose in the universe anymore now that we've got all these maneuvering thrusters that are apparently doing the job? Do we really need these engines flopping around? Now, I think one of the first things people will say is, well, they look like they should be articulated. To a certain extent, that's true, but that's true of other ships where they aren't. The outer engines on the Caterpillar, the two outboard engines on the rear, those appear to be mounted on rotating kind of pylons, but they're not. They don't rotate, and obviously if you looked at it physically, if you tried to rotate the engines downward to land it, the engines would hit before the ship would hit the ground, and that would obviously cause a disaster. So I kind of come back to this: does the Cutlass need to have its rear engine pods articulate anymore? Considering that the old animation was removed off of the old Cutlass in November of 2015? Question mark? It's been gone for at least 4 years, if not more. Do we even really need to bring it back at this point? Now, when I was kind of going back and getting this footage, I was so happy that the landing site that I was going to be landing on was, in the dark, because if you pay attention to the footage, you can see that when the engines are in their normal flight position, they're really the only source of thrust, pushing the ship forward that the ship has anymore. None of the other little control jets are actually firing towards the rear to allow it to kind of slide forward as it hovers. So I would almost say that in the interim, since this feature was removed, that it's been kind of just set aside. And now that we kind of come back to the ship, no, we should re-articulate the thrusters again. I think that what wasn't taken into account was the complete lack of rearward thrusters when that wasn't a thing, you know? And so, I mean, we've kind of gotten used to not having articulated thrusters on the Cutlass. And I mean, it may have been out there and I never saw it, but I never really saw all this real outcry for articulated thrusters coming back on the Cutlass. I had, as someone who has owned a Cutlass for a long time, I mean, it was the first ship that I ever bought in Star Citizen. It's one of the ships that I've always maintained in my hangar, no matter what I wanted to get. I've never really missed it. I've never went, I kind of wish that they still, articulated and flopped around. I've just accepted it the way it is. I always kind of looked at it and said, it's distantly reminiscent of the A10, the way it's got its engines mounted on the rear. And I kind of like that. I kind of... I really don't feel that bringing back the articulated thrusters really does anything. And obviously, the devs are going to have to do a little work to account for those missing rearward thrusters if they want to bring articulated thrusters back. And maybe they can do it, and maybe they can make it work. But I think that the articulated thrusters they're really a relic of the original expectation that the Cutlass was going to be the highly maneuverable pirate fighter in a world where the Vanguard, sorry, where the Buccaneer didn't exist. I mean, that is the reason why the Buccaneer came into existence, is because the Cutlass wasn't living up to the original hype that had been built around it. And realistically, despite, what looks good in a commercial, it was never going to be that. It was never really going to be that ship. And that's the reason why the Buccaneer came into existence. And I think that bringing these back now, I don't really think that it does anything for the Cutlass. It just kind of creates more complications at a time when we would probably be trying to kind of slim these things out where we can to help get the game done, faster than, having to kind of go back and revise ships again and again and again to account for missing things or things that were forgotten or things that weren't noticed in the original creation of the ship. So I think that, I don't know. I mean, I'm speaking for myself here because I'm saying that, to be perfectly honest, if CIG had come right out and said no more articulated thrusters on the Cutlass, if they had just flat out stated that tomorrow, if I said in the past tense and I said tomorrow, sorry, yeah, if CIG just put out a post and just said, we're just not going to do articulated thrusters on the Cutlass. It's just going to be one of these things that we're just going to drop because it doesn't really make sense, or it doesn't work, or would create too much work for us. I would be perfectly okay with that. I would have zero problem with that. I would be like, okay, that's fine. No issue here. Because the truth is like, when they took it away to kind of revise it 4 or 5 years ago, I mean, I had in the interim completely gotten used to, the ship just being without articulated thrusters. And honestly, I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe CIG will come up with an idea to put an extra set of thrusters on the fairings in the front. Not sure if that would even work or how that would look. But, I think that really, since we've gotten the new Cutlass, I think it's fine as it is. I don't really think that we need the articulated thrusters, in my opinion, anymore. But once again, my opinion isn't the only one that counts out there. So, what do you think?
thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.